Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be covering something that I saw on Reddit the other day and I feel like it's a common question. It was someone who was moving from a React front end to Rails 7 and they were wondering how to persist data between pages. So let's say you have, in this case, a form, you click on About or Contact, the form stays, so that's proving it's not refreshing, but the rest of the page is reloading. And the example they had was like you had a podcast player or something that continues to play. In this case, I'm just using a form because I don't feel like implementing an entire podcast player for the sake of, demonstrating this. But hopefully you get the idea. Now this is going to be applicable for pretty much anything, and it's pretty much straight out of the Turbo handbook with a couple of additional tweaks. And I'll have a link to this in the video description. It's just a whole bunch of stuff that teaches you how to use Turbo. And then in the Turbo references, it was also in the data-turbo-permanent, where I found it in the data attributes. So I'll have a link to both of those in the video description. But in terms of making this work, it's actually pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at this. We'll CD out of here. We'll do a Rails new video, and then we'll CD into the video, just like that. So basically what we need to do is we need to tell the navbar that the link should still work, but the form should be permanent. And it's very important that you clarify that the link should still work there, because if you set up your Turbo frame incorrectly, you'll break these links. This won't change, but in the same vein, your links will no longer work. So, probably don't want that. To get started, let's do a Rails G controller, pages home with a about and a contact action. So it'll give us these three actions. Now let's go ahead and, did I open this up in VS Code already? I don't think I did. So let's do a code dot to open this up in VS Code. I'll drag this over. We'll come into the config and the routes.rb. Inside of the routes, we're just very quickly going to change these. It's now going to be a route to the pages controller home action. It'll be a get for the about and the contact, which will take us to the respective pages controller and then the respective action. So that changes our routes. Let's go ahead and let's run a Rails S and refresh on localhost port 3000. That looks good. Next, let's come up to our app, our views, our layouts, and our application.html.erb. Inside of our application.html.erb file, let's go ahead and let's create a navbar. I'm just going to render a shared/navbar. And then in our views, right click, new folder, call this shared. And inside of shared, let's right click, new file, underscore navbar.html.erb. And then in our nav bar, let me open up my notes real quick so I have something to copy paste from. We're just going to have a nav like this that has our three links that take us to these paths. So we'll refresh. You now click on About, Contact, and Home, and that works as you would expect it to. Okay, so in order to make this persist, you need the data-turbo permanent or whatever. So the first thing we can try is let's create a input. So we'll create a quick little input for this. Which we'll just do, let me hit F11 over here. We'll do with a form with the URL is just going to be stubbed out, so we're not going to use it. Have a method of get, and then we'll do F. So just a very basic Rails form here. We'll do a f.text field for the query, and then we can go ahead and close that, and then we'll do a f.submit that says search. Something like that. Over here, refresh, we now have this. If we click on the links, you'll see that every time I click on the link, the text disappears because the whole page is refreshing. So what we can try and do is we can come over here to this form with, and we can see what the turbo action here suggested, which was to add data-turbo permanent to whatever you want to persist, I guess. So to do that, let's come over here to the text field. Let's do a data colon, and we'll say turbo permanent, right? Go ahead and put the space there. Refresh the page, do a test, click on About, click on Contact. Every time we click, it's still not working. Why is that? Well, in the handbook here, it mentions that I think the things need a unique ID somewhere, hopefully. It should mention it right here, give them an ID. But of course, if we open up our console here, we can click on this input and we can see that this already has an ID of query. So this isn't a unique ID issue. It could be a turbo frame tag issue. So what we'll do is we'll come up here to the application.html. which isn't where we're going to put it in the final version, but I want to cover this so you can see what the error is. So if we put the turbo frame tag here, we give it a name of navbar, the do block, we now have something, if I click on this, that has a ID, turbo frame ID of navbar. But if I click on about, we'll see a content missing error. Why is this? Well, when we click on the link, it's going to grab this and it's going to try and replace it with whatever needs to be on that page. The issue with that is if we open up our home page, for example, there is no turbo frame tag in our home page already. So if we open this up, we come over here, we can see the turbo frame right here, but it's not being replaced with anything. So we need to give it like a target. So let's come into our home page. Let's put in this target. Now, if I refresh and I click on this home link, we won't see content missing anymore. But you'll also see that there's nothing that's replaced here. So this isn't replacing anything. The target here still exists, but it's just kind of being replaced with nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and we're going to move this into our navbar itself. So we'll come in here, do something like, let's do it down here so we can, let's do it up here. Let's try and make sure that we cover all of the cases. So we can grab this, we can move it all the way down here. We can refresh the page. We can now do a test. We can click on about. We'll see content missing still. If we come over here, let's go to the home page. We can click on home. You'll see it's not really taking us there. So when I click on this, we're not getting content missing, but you'll notice that like it's not taking us to the about page. We get the content missing on the other pages. So let's grab this turbo frame tag. Let's put this on the about page and the contact page so it stops bothering us. There we go. And now that all three pages have that, we can click on the link. It's not taking us to any other page though. It's only leaving us on the home page. Why is that? Well, because the links are inside of the turbo frame tag. So this is where you have to be very careful. You have to make sure that your links are outside of this frame. So now when you click on these links, it will move you between pages. If we come up here, we click on home, we do like a test, we click on about, you'll see it's still disappearing. Why is that? Well, this has a unique ID. The data permanent is right here. But what's interesting is the other elements also need a unique ID. So if we click on the search, the form here needs a unique ID. And this is where you kind of get caught with a gotcha, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this and we're going to say, let's give the form an ID. Right here after the get, we'll do a ID of navbar form. We'll refresh the page and now we'll do a test case. Click on about, and you'll see it's still not quite working. So the other thing we could try is we could try to put the data-permanent up here. And I'm covering this just so you can see like what the troubleshooting process is here. But if we click on test case now, or if we type in test case now, we click on home, you'll see it's still not quite working. Let's refresh, make sure it's not a fluke. So what's the issue? Well, it needs to have both the ID and the data-turbo or the data-turbo-permanent. So what we're ultimately going to get here is a form with, as a method of get, an ID of navbar-form. This part doesn't matter, name it whatever you want. And then a data-turbo-permanent true. And then we also give this text field a data-turbo-permanent. Now let's try a test case. Click on about, click on contact, you'll see that's persisting. We can get rid of this data-permanent. We can refresh, test case, click on about, click on contact, and you see this is working just fine. So again, the reason why I'm covering it like this is so you can see that there's quite a few ways where if you don't do it exactly the way that it expects you to, you can get stuck and it's just not going to work for whatever reason. So you want your data permanent on your form, not on your field. You want your frame tag inside of your navbar or whatever your shared component is. But if you have any links, you want to make sure that those are kind of not stuck inside of the turbo frame. There's other ways to manage this. You could, of course, grab this, and I'm going to move this up to, I think, here. That should preserve the HTML. If we do this, and then we come over here and we refresh, if we click on about, everything will disappear again. If you're ever in a situation like this, you absolutely need these links to work. You can do it. And now, if we come in here and we put a data turbo underscore frame of underscore top, just like this. If you now put these in and refresh the page, you can do a test case. This will replace the entire contents, not just the frame. And now if we click on about and contact, this will work because these are still being set to permanent while these are setting the turbo frame to be, or the turbo frame target to be underscore top. And if you're not familiar with like what does underscore top do as a target, you can always just Google it, figure it out. It specifies that the link page or form response will be open in the topmost frame. So this is like your overall window browser. So instead of it just trying to replace the contents of this frame tag itself, it's trying to replace the entire contents of the page. But because we have a data turbo permanent right here with a form that has an ID and a field that has an ID, all of this makes sure that this persists even when these links cause the entire page to get replaced. So if we hit Control R, of course, that's gonna, nuke it. But now we can come over here and click on these. It'll work just fine with your turbo frame tag wrapping around effectively everything if you want it to. It's really up to you how you set this up. But yeah, hopefully this is, something you've needed answered. It's now answered. You can now go on and do stuff like this. And hopefully by showing you all of the ways this can break and the different ways that you can use this, it will, make sure that you understand it a little bit better. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.